Hi, welcome back to Forged in Fundamentals. I'm your host, John Gray, and today I have a very special guest, Cameron Ford, who needs no introduction, but I always like to introduce how I know people. And so, Cameron is how I got my start in really formalized detection training. But I'm going to let you talk about kind of your experience with detection dog training.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. It's always an honor to come on different podcasts and share, the experience of detection dogs in the detection dog world. Um, my background, I started like many other dog handlers. Um, my first real job as a canine handler was in the military. I was just lucky before that I grew up with a guy who started police canines in Florida back in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was my neighbor growing up. So then fast forward, I ended up going to the military. I get lucky. I get stationed in Germany of all places. So then I made it my goal to travel around Europe and learn all these different dog programs while I was over there for about 5 years. Fast forward, come back to the United States, started off my first business, which used to be called Universal Canine way back in the day. Apparently, there's been two, and there's been somebody who did it after I did, had the same name, but they got in some trouble legally with how they did stuff with dogs, or whatever. So I always have to preface that like I'm not that Universal Canine. I was the other one. Um, but then within about 5 years of doing that, I ended up becoming a police officer in Florida. I was already a state canine trainer there. The agencies I worked for in Florida, I played the role. I was obviously an enrolled patrolman. I was also in SWAT for one of the agencies, and then, but for the funny part was those agencies I worked for in Florida were previously customers of mine when I had the dog business where I was bringing dogs in from Europe, training these agencies with their dogs. So it was cool to go work for them. But then the government came calling during the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. I found myself in San Antonio, Texas, where I continued on in law enforcement there too, but in a reserve status. And then, but really focused in on getting teams trained up and deployed to go to the Middle East. And then from that world, which is a contracting world, is kind of how I ended up in the Navy SEAL world as a government contractor for a friend of mine named Jeff Franklin under Cobra Canine, and I ended up working as later on the senior instructor for the SEAL teams 1, 3, 5, and 7 as what they refer to as a subject matter expert in the dog side of things. Our jobs as civilians was to stay in our lane and just make sure the dogs were selected properly, trained properly, and employed properly within the SEAL teams. Um, but it was also some of the coolest work I ever got to do with dogs. It was also the most humbling because when I went there, I felt confident about my dog training skills, but realized I still had a ways to go. But that's what brought me into the science world, which then brought me into more specifically the detection dog world. So when I left the SEAL teams, came back into the private sector, and I kinda had a choice. When I went from the SEAL team community with my law enforcement background, I could have focused on what a lot of people did, which was the what I call the tactical world, the tactics, the deployment of patrol dogs with SWAT teams or other specialized units. But I, at that time, saw that there was no real detection dog community, or I don't wanna say community, but just there was nobody in the training world heavily focused to detection dogs at that time. So I saw that as an opportunity. Plus, I was really geeking out on the science side of the dog world. So that's where kind of I found my way into really focusing in that world of detection dogs and taking the lessons learned from both law enforcement, contractor world, SEAL team world, and then saying, "Hey, what can we do to become better?" And then that really grew to what it is today, which is Fordk9, where we have a schoolhouse. We, train students all over the world. A lot of it has been with me on the road doing seminars, but also like what you came out to is our detection dog training class, where people from different backgrounds, law enforcement, civilians, and so forth, kind of come here and go through our detection dog training. And I call it detection dog training class, not trainer class, only because, as you got to see, there's a lot we cover, and it's really making sure we're training the dogs with as much clarity as possible, but also being flexible to adjust to the various different detection disciplines. As many people know, bomb dogs may not operate the exact same way drug dogs do. And some of the other detection disciplines that are out there are also very unique and special and do things differently. So, as you got to see at the school with a mixture of different backgrounds, The cool part is it really exposes people to a much broader view of detection and helps you see things from other lenses. And sometimes what you learn from another detection discipline could be useful for what you're doing in your discipline. And sometimes many things just aren't. But yeah, so a
Yeah.
long, a short version, but still long. That was kind of how we got to where we're at today.
Yeah, and you touched on a couple of things that I think just as a dog trainer really fascinate me. And one is science, but two, as I've trained handlers and dogs, the biggest thing I've picked up on is how do you pair science with a handler's intuition, right? And I can train somebody on, hey, this is how you do this, but having those instincts and the intuition, that one you can't train so much. That kind of takes time, I think, to develop. And so, I think when you talk about the science world, you have to know and understand that because it makes you more powerful as a trainer, figuring out how the dogs learn and how they work. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of like when we came out to that class, there's so many people with different backgrounds and also the dogs are at completely different levels. We had dogs that were already certified and then dogs that were puppies that just blew my mind because in the time we were together, they went from knowing nothing to searching rooms and searching outside. And it was just awesome to see that science come together with that. But um I think what really fascinates me right now in the law enforcement world is there's been a little bit of a shift where I'm starting to see more agencies get puppies. And you had Melanie Yude on, and you guys talked about, you know, she dives so deep into the neuro side of things with puppies and development. Um, but I was curious to hear your thoughts on like, you have a puppy now that you're training and kind of the selection process and how you think that this could, impact dog selection in the future for law enforcement from a puppy perspective.
Yeah, well, first you're bringing up the old adage of science versus experience. And the experience side of things has a lot of value. The science has a lot of value. And what we hope or what we learn from the science side is helps us understand sometimes the why something occurs. Maybe fills in the gap that experience kind of told us, but there was no proof behind it. And developing puppies is a lot of an art. And there's not been a ton of science. Now, I would say in probably the past 30 years, there's been a lot of science that helps us understand why it's important to expose puppies to a lot of environmental aspects to make them more solid when it comes to dealing with the environment. Because we both know the number one thing that washes out working dogs, specifically police canines or military dogs or other specialized dogs, is almost always gonna be an environmental issue is the number one culprit. They're not capable of working in certain environments, loud noises, slick floors, you name it. The environmental aspect is usually the issue. So, there was a lot of, um, focus or understanding of development of puppies to make sure that they are gonna be able to adapt to the world as it's presented to them. And lessons that we've learned is if you stay in one place too long, so like your location, your kennel, your business, whatever it is, and you don't venture out enough, especially in those early weeks, you're missing out on a window that's critical for the dog to learn experiences and to go through what these experiences feel like, how they work through them. Some dogs naturally are just bold and nothing really phases them too much. My That's how my dog Ammo is, nothing really phased him, but he still, at a certain point in time, had a period where he would randomly pick things to be weird about. My current puppy, Neo, who's gonna be electronics media detection, I would say isn't as strong as Ammo is naturally when it comes to environmentals. Like, Ammo was always like, "I don't give a crap about this or that." We used to call him Boss Baby because that's just how he was, but the Neo is a little bit more thoughtful, like, he's gotta kinda check it out for a second, but he recovers immediately, like, his drive and motivation overrides the stress of something new, even though he sees it's new, but he'll, like, "I wanna check it out," so he kinda leans in and, like, checks it out and then really realizes it's not gonna bite him or do something weird to him. He's immediately like, "Okay, I'm good with it." Um And that still may be just a phase for him. But just in the years of doing this, the number one thing that is important is to make sure the puppies are sound environmentally. Then, while I'm in that phase, parallel is we're working on drive development. So I'm doing things to help increase motivation for things that I find that might be useful, such as I come from the world where I like to use toys quite a bit in detection. And again, giving Neo as an example, Neo was what I would call, if I was putting a scale of 1 to 10, he was about a 6 or so for toys. Now, he is closer to an 8 for toys. Like, every night when he's loose in the house, he's gotta come up to me, drop his ball in my lap so I can throw it against the wall, and he just will do this all night long. The funny part is, though, from the day I got him, his food motivation was a 10. Like, he will do anything for the food. And even, like, last night, I did a video of him searching, our pipe wall that and I'm rewarding with food to keep him there, to keep reps going, and then my last rep was a toy, and he loves a toy, and he goes and gets it, but as soon as he gets his toy, he takes his toy and goes back to the wall and drops the toy because he wants more food to happen. So, he's so I would say now, like I was saying, his toy is probably an 8-ish range, it'll probably go a little bit higher. His food has stayed at 10 all the way through, which is great. It gives me options for training. So, as I develop this puppy, I'm developing his play mechanics, his motivation for food and toy, and how I can use that for training. And it's simple things like how we interact. Him being pushy, I may give him something, and I'm okay with that at the beginning. So some people, when they don't want a puppy so pushy because it can come into other areas, but my 31 years of doing it, I kind of know what that landscape looks like. So I know when to kind of stop letting him be too pushy, or knowing how I wanna cap how much energy or drive he puts towards food, so that way I can give value to toy, and the way I kinda did that, just so the listeners can understand, is I kinda let him play with toy around Ammo, who is, I would say, pretty much every day a solid 8 on toys, and he's always been a 9 or a 10 on food. Um, but Ammo is very competitive, and because Ammo
Mhm.
always wants the toy that the other dogs wants, by default, and a dog like Neo was like, "No, I'm strong too. I want the toy." So now it's kind of reversed because I let them play enough together, knowing that I did that by design has made Ammo like almost not, I won't call it submit, but if Neo's got 2 toys in front of him, he doesn't try to take the toys from Neo. Neo just wants to have them. But it created possession for Neo that I wanted to have. Now, again, I have to preface this is me with experience doing this because it could go really badly with other types of dogs. You could see aggression, you could see some really possessiveness and guarding, resource guard, things that you do not wanna have. These dogs, I knew in their personalities didn't have those qualities. They weren't really strong, resource guarding or being, and I was controlling the play. I would restrict certain things, or certain behaviors would show themselves, and I was like, "Nope, we're done." I'd pull the toys away, do whatever. That helped, but there's other things I can do. So I can play with the dog. I can do things like I was doing with Neo that he does now, which is he wants to go retrieve it. It's not so much about he's heavily about possessing it in his mouth. He likes the game of having me toss it and him go getting it. So I'll use that in my detection. So environmental followed by the drive building or motivation building. And then the next one is going to be my search development aspects. So at this same time, another parallel I do that goes off the toy game or food game is we build these little games where they have to search for those items, a toy or food. The trick to this is what happens too often is people will have the dog play this game of searching for toy or for food for too long. And the dog's mindset when it comes to searching starts turning into, well, when you say search or you want me to go do something, I'm searching for a toy. So what I want to do is I wanna give the mechanics of searching with the toy, but as soon as I see they got the game, then I replace the toy with, whatever odor I'm gonna teach the dog to, so whatever substance or item, like I did with Neo, I started placing those items, in this case, the electronic media devices, the SD cards and stuff, in the search environment with only a small piece of food or small piece of toy next to it. So I was bridging the gap. His brain was like, "I'm looking for this." But as soon as he came across this faint smell of, let's say, the food, there was a stronger smell of these electronic devices. And literally within a few reps of this game, probably within 2 training days of this, I was just putting out the devices by themselves. He was going, "Okay, yep, that's what I'm looking for," and as soon as he acknowledged he found it, I would just drop food down on him, and
Yeah.
that kept him there. So, that's the development. It's environmental, it's developing motivation, and developing search skills. So, in a puppy, those are the 3 pillars that I'm going by to make sure that I'm building that up to be ready for when we start formalized detection, which would be probably I've already started it with him, and he's 6 months old right now, going on 7, and we literally did our 13th training session last night. So, from 8 weeks old to right now, he's done 13 sessions total. That's the search games I was talking about with odor there, to where he's at now, where he'll search the brick wall or the pipe wall and find the electronic media devices, and the craziest part is he's sitting by himself. I've not taught a sit. I have not I've just, me, I like the freeze indication. His
Yeah.
freeze indication is he naturally goes into a sit, so I'm not changing it. But there's a video I'm gonna share to our membership group, tomorrow, where you're gonna see him for no reason whatsoever other than trying to figure out what works, is he will go search the wall, and then randomly a couple times he picks some spot in the wall and just sits with a decent what would look like a good indication. But he quickly realizes nothing happens, so then he moves on. But he needs to go through that without me interfering too much, so he learns, like, in his little mind as he's deducing this game of, yes, he kinda knows odor. He's only done the pipe wall. Last night was his 3rd time ever doing it. So, he's going, "Okay, I kinda know this game. I remember this happens," and it's natural for dogs to pick something, like, what got me my reward? And it's usually the last thing that they did. So, as I'm training a detection dog, the behavior is usually the last thing that they can connect to reinforcement, which when training becomes too focused about the trained final response, that really makes dogs go, got it. Trained final response gets me
Yep.
reinforcement, which is why you see a lot more falses. I'm trying to make him understand it's all about the odor. But even in his learning, he's going, okay, I do understand this position gets me some reinforcement. What he got to learn last night was, even though he only done the wall a few times, and he probably remembered, oh, if I sit here and look at this wall, I get reinforcement. But once he made the connection to that it was the odor, when he got nothing from me at all, when he did his little behavioral things, because he's just doing operant behaviors. That's all he's really offering me. So
Yeah.
once he left that when nothing was happening, he found the odor and he was like, "Oh, oh yeah, I remember this too." And then I just started building it. And then by the end of the session, it was super confident. He's like, "Got it. I have to find this. And when I find this other thing I do, this happens," because I rewarded him for sometimes standing, freezing at it, because all I cared about was his acknowledgement of the odor,
Yep.
not his behavior. So he started realizing, though he may sit and that reinforcement does happen, it's actually the odor is the trigger, and that's the
Yeah.
reinforcement. So this is, as you develop puppies, you have to be very aware of, there's a developmental phase, which is what I've been sharing, and then it morphs into starting to become more formalized later on when there's some maturity aspects. You don't want to force too much too soon. And like I said, going from 8 weeks old to where we're at now, we've only had 13 sessions. So
Yeah.
that should tell people this isn't an everyday thing for us. He's a puppy 80% of the time right now. He runs around the
Yep.
backyard, chases ammo, and they do that like every day. Every few days, sometimes it's weeks between, I'll go into the training building, and you'll see he's young. He goes like, "Oh yeah, I kind of know this what this game is." And I kind of set it up for better success, because with, in this case, electronic media devices, I have to create a number. I have to put like 3 to 4 devices out together
Yeah.
just to create enough odor for him to go, this is relevant to me. So what I call it, as you probably remember, is a low to moderate odor, depending on what your chemical is. So sometimes low to moderate is a really small amount to, because of the odor, the substance is really strong smelling. And in other cases, like electronic media, which doesn't smell that much, you have to have more items to still get to low to moderate odor. So Yeah, that's some of that whole beginning developmental
Yeah.
stage, which is the important part.
I mean, it's really fascinating to see, and something that I thought was cool that, you and Natalie have hit on lately is I think as handlers, sometimes we stay in stages, especially cops, too long, right? Because we're like, oh, I need to do this many reps on boxes or whatever. But I'll use this puppy we're training right now, for example. So the dog is right about 4 months old, right? And so we've been just doing a lot of puppy play and really hitting on what Michael talks, about in that class as that critical development period, right? So we want the dog to see as many things as we can cram into the experience while making it an enjoyable experience, so that he has fun doing it. What was really fascinating, once we started the detection work, we'd go somewhere to just go visit people or noises, and he'd start searching the room, right? And it's like, you can see where his brain's at right now because he's a 12 out of 10 food,
Yeah.
right? And so he likes toy too, but it just was really fascinating to see. But what resonated with me was you guys talking about bringing concepts in sooner than later, just that they may see. And I think what we've learned is just the clarity of the odor and the understanding of the odor drives them so much further in how well they do than like so many other things. And just bringing in novel odor, you know, bringing in our, sometimes we use Tad jars, sometimes it might be a plastic bag. Well, the sooner I can put a plastic bag in that room or an empty Tad jar and it's hidden in there and the dog can say, wait a second, that's part of this odor, but that's not it. And they start understanding it's the specific odor. I just felt like our success went from, 0 to 80 in like no time because the dog was just had such a better understanding of the odor they were finding, and then bringing in different distractions, right? And so, you could kind of see like, hey, we could play with this a little bit and see, well, we don't want to throw too much too soon, but where's that threshold at? It might be a little bit different for each dog because, like you said, it's environmentals. And some people, in all fairness, a lot of law enforcement handlers don't have the same opportunities for training, right?
Mhm,
So training a
mhm,
puppy may not even be an option for them,
for sure.
or maybe they don't have the experience training with a puppy, but those environmentals can be difficult. And so going, especially with a puppy, you're taking them through, they start hearing something loud, it totally distracts them. So, I took it to heart when we talked about in our class, like proofing your handler. Let's get rid of those cues as soon as possible. So ruffling with their bag, messing with equipment, go stand at the wrong box, see what that does to the dog, right? Even in imprinting, we started doing imprinting where we would have just blank, right? Hey, you have one rep where there's no odor there, and you can still reward the dog, after they've sniffed all the boxes to show them. Sometimes the right answer is there's nothing there,
Yeah.
but it was really cool to see you guys talking about that because I think for handlers, that's a really good thing to know is you don't have to do 5,000 reps on the boxes before you're going to be successful searching a room. You just have to really base everything off the progression you see in your dog.
You're highlighting the important thing, which is called flexibility, right? And within the law enforcement community, we like institutionalized things, like, and we like comfortability. Let's keep it the same. Let's do it the same, and do this over and over again. In dog training, like you highlighted, that a lot of times ends up being the culprit to a lot of other problems because the dog then expects it to be a certain way. In the real world, where we have zero control, there's a lot of variables that show up. And if the dog there's a thing called behavioral momentum. And the science behind that basically is if an animal does something, let's say 700 times with reinforcement, and does something else 300 times for reinforcement, when both are presented at the same time, they're going to go to the thing with the most history to it. So in this case, if I'm training a drug dog, but it's vast majority, and I just did a social media post today about this, if their history is lots of reinforcement for that handler's detection kit, whatever it is, the dog's really good with it. And then how it's contained, like what storage procedures they have and so forth. All of those things kind of make up what I call the odor picture, the total picture. And then the dog goes, got it. This is what I get reinforced for. So then when it comes into the real world environment, and yes, the chemical is similar to the dog, but it goes, my history is this other stuff. So the handler will see a change, but you won't see commitment from the dog. However, if we show the dog, and I'm already doing this with the puppy, here's the substance I'm using today. Tomorrow, I'm going to use a different manufacturer who makes this same substance, and I'm going to use a different way I stored it. So then that way the dog goes, "Oh, okay. There is something similar here. I should pay attention to that, not the entire odor picture, which is again my scent plus how I've stored it plus all these things that the dogs start going, got it. It's this context is really relevant, but if there's a deviation, I don't feel confident. So what we want to show them is a lot of deviations of what that target looks like. So that way they go, got it. It's not exactly the same, but that's what I'm looking for. And the sooner we show them that flexibility, the easier it is for them to generalize. Yes, you want me to find this substance, regardless of whether it's hidden under this fabric or concealed under this technique, or it's only this low odor, or it's, homemade versus made by a professional manufacturer or what have you. So it's super, super, super important not to fall into the rut, which we've done for years, which is go do the same thing, grab my training odors, go put them in the gas cap, the filing cabinet, the desk drawer, the places that you never find it ever operationally, but this is where we put it out all the time. And the sooner we break ourselves out of that habit, get creative ourselves, show the dog different pictures, the dog will get much better at telling you when it's present or not present. And I'll hit this last part that you mentioned in what you said is as we develop that flexibility of showing them, hey, this is what it looks like this. This is what it looks like that. This is what it looks like concealed. Just like you said, we also have to give them pictures where no odor is present way sooner than later. The
Yeah.
old system was we never showed dogs blanks until, like, way later on. Now we show blanks literally. I mean, my dog's on 13 sessions, his next session will be a blank because I need to show him that there's 0, and then the question comes up, well, how do I reinforce, how do I reward that? So for us, and what I've been sharing a lot more recently, and I think you guys got a little bit of it, is where if my dog clears the area and they're not showing me anything, just like I gave the dog a search command, sook, seek, whatever, I'm also going to give them all done or finished or whatever word I want to use that bookends. It says we're done for the moment. So if I see my dog search whatever this is, I'll pick the wall because that's the example I have. My dog will search the wall. When it shows me there's nothing there and it doesn't give me any kind of falses, I'm going to say, and then this is where the window of time comes in. So in the beginning, when it's new, I'm not going to require them to search the wall for that long. If he gives me a pass up and down and shows me there's nothing there, I'll say all done. And then in this case, I'll probably reward him with a piece of food and let him go play. As it develops, and probably the next time I show him a blank, I'll make him work longer before I say all done, or I'll make him search a couple things before I say we're all done. What all done really is like I said, it's a cue. It's not a marker. I'm not going to always reward after that signal or that cue. I'm just going to reward maybe, just like saying sook, seek, search doesn't always predict they're going to find something. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're going to hear a reward. So the start signal or cue is just the same as by me having a end signal or cue. It doesn't always predict reward, but in the beginning, I'll probably reward it a few times just to give it a little bit of value and also just to tell the dog, I'm happy that you did this. And this experience of searching is super fun. But the expectation isn't searching and you must find something, because that's the bigger problem we have is these dogs, because of we always do it the same way, and the handler too, when I say this, both expect that when they come up to a search area, they're going to find something, because especially if it's a training day.
Yeah.
Well, the dogs will take the context and go, "Ooh, when I get out of the car, this happens. We go in this building, we're going to find something." I need to violate that expectation way sooner than later and start showing them that no, when you get out and you go search, it doesn't mean you're going to find something all the time. In fact, as we get better at our skill, you're probably going to find it 50% or less, depending on what the dog's job is. So by showing them that, I can also show them that I will reinforce you. If you do a good job and I like how you did that job, I'm going to reinforce you. Sometimes with your favorite thing, sometimes with nothing more than a pet in the side and say, good job. That's where that variable reinforcement schedule can start, or variable reinforcement type schedule comes in, where I can show them that, yes, you did a good job, but you may or may not get your favorite thing. And I'll do the same thing on odor too. because it's, say, a bomb dog, I may not be able to give the bomb dog its favorite thing on a real operational search. So I need to show them that picture in training that,
Yeah.
hey, when you find something, I'm going to mark you and we're going to get the hell out of here. I'm going to praise you, but that's all you're getting. And they'll get better about it's not such a violation to them by not getting paid when it happens, if it were to happen for real. Because I've shown them this concept in training a number of times that they get it. Hey, when I find something, I'll get paid most times, but not every single time. And if I say there's nothing here, I'll get paid sometimes, but not every time. And that starts to really give clarity to what detection really is. We don't
Yeah.
call it finding, we call it searching. So that's the reason behind it.
Well, and it's funny too because dogs, when you were talking about like teaching the search pattern, I know on the law enforcement side, it's like, okay, we come into this room and we find something to hide it in. So I've even brought in the concept of what about a blank room, right? It still has odor. I can tuck something under a piece of trim, right? But we brought our dog in the other day and there's nothing in there, and the dog kind of looks around a little bit and it's like, wait a second, there's nothing in here to search. But again, it's teaching that just run the same pattern, whether there's stuff in here or not. You can see it a lot. Like, and we saw when you came out, you have a lot of dogs that they run the room, the perimeter of the room. The center of the room doesn't get searched for a while,
Exactly.
right? Because dogs are awesome at searching the perimeter. And so it's like, hey, let's take searching things out of the concept and let's just focus on that odor pays. If
Mhm.
they go around the room and they still search, whether it's the center of the room or the walls, they may find odor. It just may not be a visual cue,
It's not gonna be the
and it's
context of an object, it could be anything.
yeah, and it's funny just seeing how things are starting to, I think, shift. And I think that the education you guys are putting out is a huge part of that because now handlers have better access to training.
Mhm.
And I don't have to be in California. I can go on to the Ford K9 platform and I can see trainings that you guys are doing and then mirror that in my training, which I feel like is super important to be open minded.
Yeah.
And I see
It's a
somebody do
double-edged
something, I'm like,
I say it's a double-edged sword of the social media part. It's great because it like you just said, it connects all of us in ways that we would never been able to do. It's also much harder to weed out especially if you're new, what information is relevant and valid and what information is maybe a little sketchy or just not even that, just not applicable to what you do.
yeah,
And I see that with detection all the time because you go to, let's say, to a Facebook group and someone says, "Hey, my dog's doing X. What do you think I should do?" And there's just opinions galore. And a lot of opinions are right based on the lens of that handler and what they do. But for the dog or the handler who's asking the question, it's not relevant because their
yeah,
discipline is so different. And I do these thought-provoking questions often within my social media posts because I just did one the other day. If and the question I asked was because somebody asked me the question, if I put odor out in this room, but then I moved it to another because it's a big room. If I move it to the other space of the room, is my dog wrong for going back to odor over here? And the answer is depends. Like if in certain
yeah,
detection disciplines, yeah, I may not want that. In other detection disciplines, how do I know that what we're going to call residual odor isn't equal in volume to low odor if someone's concealing something? And this is
yeah,
why I always ask the handlers, is your dog trained to detect substance or the odor of a substance? And the answer is your dogs are trained to detect the odor of a substance. So it is plausible that amount of odor that's left in an area meets the criteria for low odor off gassing of, let's say, an explosive or narcotics. So in those cases, the dog's not wrong, and I would reward the dog if it acknowledged it. Now, if I could clearly see the dog just runs over there, sniffs nothing, and just responds, well, that's a memory game, and that's not
yeah,
gonna get you reinforcement. So there's reasons to, multiple answers. So in the sporting dog world, that is definitely a no-no. Like if that dog goes to any spot of lingering or residual odor, they are not encouraged because that's a problem for them in that world. But in conservation could be the same thing depending on what work they go do. But in, like I said, other professional detection dog disciplines, quote unquote residual or lingering odor could be the same amount of odor as something that's being concealed or low off gassing. So I don't want to devalue that for those detection dog disciplines. So the thing that we have to remember in detection, it's never an exact way. It's not black and white. It is a rainbow of colors because there are so many variables depending on the detection disciplines. Just look within the bomb dog world. This is take that one up by itself. Well, now we have moving. We have whether you want to call it vapor wake, you want to call it mobile odor detection or passenger screening or whatever the term is. You have a moving target that your dog is supposed to go look for explosives. But then you also have what we call the traditional bomb dog, who is just searching static items and doing sweeps.
Yeah.
How you work and review these dogs and let's say certify these dogs, there are different criteria that need to be had and different skill sets within that discipline. So it's super important that we understand there's different ways to look at this and there might be different ways or different definitions of what's success or what's failure depending on what that lens is.
Yeah, and again, you touched on like the threshold at which the dog's finding odor. I mean, for me as a static dog handler, I'm going to go search a concert venue, right? There could be something that's been planted there for a while. What's the availability to the odor? Now they moved in 20 suitcases of speakers and now there's, the dog can't really get to the odor. Well, okay, if he can still, show me that it's present, right? That's valuable. That might be completely different than the bomb dog handler in, Iraq, Afghanistan that they hope they get that alert and indication way
Oh yeah,
off, right?
that'll save
So
all your brothers and sisters right there.
yeah, so it's like, is it, sometimes are you trying to get a dog maybe to give you a little bit more of like a fringe alert? It just depends on what you're doing. Yeah, it's a good answer. I mean, there's a lot of handlers out there doing a lot of different things,
Mhm.
especially even within the same, realm. Bomb dog's a great example.
It is tough because, again, with law enforcement being very institutionalized, you're not encouraged to ask questions. You're not encouraged to question those that are training you, right? And with anything, there's evolution. And
Yeah.
what a trainer did in the early 2000s or maybe the late 90s has probably lots of good things, but there's some things that have changed. And there's things that we've learned. For example, like we talked about, incorporating blanks. I've been doing this since 1993. Blanks were not even talked about until maybe the past 6 years as it's gotten more popular. If when we talked about blanks before, we just talked about there were items in my search area that had nothing in it. So if I searched 5 rooms, I had 3 blanks, but my dog always found something.
Yeah.
Versus now, when we say blank or control negative, the entire search has nothing in it. That is a newer concept that did not exist up until I would call it less than a decade ago, because it was probably, and I'll admit, in other disciplines, it was very common, but in the law enforcement world, not common at all. So this is something that as new handlers are coming into it, and if you're working with a trainer who is very comfortable in what they do and they're not really open to some newer updated concepts that will be create a limitation for you that will have some fallout that you are going to deal with that the trainer is not, because the trainer isn't the one typically going to court for you. The trainer isn't the one on scene trying to explain what you're going through, or what I call for me now, it's a failure in training if I haven't prepared you for those things as an instructor. So I need to
Yeah.
look back at myself as an instructor and say, have I done what I need to do to prepare dog and handler for their job? And if I haven't, or I'm not doing things like double blinds or control negatives or full on putting the teams into that mode of what their operational world looks like, I'm not just training to a certification, I'm training to operational readiness, then I've probably failed them. Or if they go on
Yeah.
the road and they still aren't really good about it, they're struggling or they're not. Where did I go wrong to not give this team that confidence or that skill set? And I'll say, most cases that finger points back to the instructor. Are there occasions that we have people that just aren't made for this work? Absolutely. I've had a few in my career where I'm like, you'd be great for traffic homicide investigation. The black and white world is great for you. Measurements, numbers, that's your thing. dog world where you have to change definitions really quickly or what you think is successful and not successful. There's that gray that exists a lot of times or the
Yep.
ability to read the dog. For some people, that's a hard struggle. And though they
Yeah.
love dogs, they're just not the ones cut out for it. So again, we have to be reflective. We have to say, did I do my job as an instructor? Did I give them all the tools? Did I put them through these things, dog and handler? And then also through that, do I see that I have an individual that though they love this, this isn't their game. They
Yeah.
are better suited for something else, and there's conversations that need to be had for that.
Yeah, and I think with the, rigidness of law enforcement and, hey, like, I think just now we're starting to see a lot of the cool things from the pet dog world and the sport dog world kinda come into some of the training, but, you can say, "Hey, oh, this dog's no good." Well, we also have learned now there's a lot of problem solving you can do, that didn't exist before because of that,
Mhm.
and especially, you look at people who've doing pet modification for 30 years, they've been training doing behavior mod, but that was like, well, I don't know, the dog, I wanted the dog to do this, it doesn't do it, it's no good, send it back, but I think we're starting to see that concept change that, hey, let's diagnose the behavior and let's figure out how do you train through it because it's no different than, like you said, especially with, your own odor dog, all of a sudden some random behavior comes up and you're like, since when do you do that? And now you got to figure out, how do I fix that? How can I take the approach to, maybe change up my reinforcement schedule or what am I reinforcing with? And I was listening the other day, you were talking about, we used to train that final response. We put so much emphasis on, oh, the dog needs to sit. Well, the dog we're training now is a pointer.
Mhm.
What better response than the dog just locks up and I'm pulling on the leash and he's like, I am not moving. I'm a
Yep.
statue right here, right? Because in court, they're like, I didn't tell him, I can't tell the dog to point on
I have
command.
no command that makes my dog
Yeah.
point.
And if you find one, let me know,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's cool to see some of that flexibility coming in. And especially you have to have that when you're doing puppy training because puppies are just like mush sometimes. They're
Yeah.
little sponges, and you just have to be so flexible with that training.
Puppies are in that as you got to hear the interview when I did with Dr. Melanie Uda was that brain is in its best form to learn. That's the whole reason to it's like the example of when do you want to teach a child another language? Do you wait till you reach high school and start learning a language then? Or do you start teaching that little kid who's maybe 2 or 3 years old? And it's proven over and over again that the brain is the most flexible during those developmental stages. And then once you kind of get past a certain age, you can still, old dogs still learn new tricks. It just takes
Yeah.
a lot more repetition, a lot more time than it did when I was a young dog learning that trick.
Yeah.
So, to the point being, take advantage of the fact that when you have a puppy, this is your window to teach a lot of different concepts and a lot of flexibility is there to show them how what gets reinforced, how to solve a problem, like all these different things, these experiences they have. And if we don't kind of capitalize on that, you're missing out on what you probably could have versus taking advantage of it. I'll admit right now, I wish I take Neo out more than I do because my schedule is what it is. I'm lucky genetically he's solid that he can handle even though I don't, because then sometimes I flood him because, like, for example, when he was probably 4 months old, I took him to one of our, a week-long event in downtown San Francisco. So he went from being here on the property to all of a sudden being in downtown San Francisco every single day for a week and going into a convention center with 40,000 people. So that got him over a hump really well. But then we went back and he sat around for 2 weeks, back at my place playing around and goofing off and not getting it. So I have to make a concerted effort to, well, crap, I need to go take him to the Lowe's or the PetSmart or wherever and just get him out and about so that way he gets used to this world versus me just, kind of getting in my ruts and letting him that we got the dog for a reason. If you're willing to go, and this is the law enforcement, if you're a law enforcement getting a puppy, if you're doing that, you got to put in the work because that's the biggest difference is when the current model is go buy the adult dog or the young adult dog and you kinda know what your quantity is, like, what my dog is capable of. It's been selection tested for at least that. The puppy, if you have good genetics, that's the first part you wanna start with is, "Okay, I got good genetics, I got proven the parents are proven what they've done, but what I have to do is I gotta put in the work." And that's the harder part. Like you said, some agencies it's easier. Like they're a big agency, lots of dogs. So adding a puppy to the mix of what they do is not a hard thing to do. If you're a 3-person canine program, way harder. I
Yeah.
look at it for these bigger agencies in most cases, even if the puppy doesn't work out, you've only lost a couple grand for the puppy because a lot of agencies wash out adult dogs a lot of times. And a lot of
Yeah.
agencies, whether they admit it or not, have lost a lot of money on adult dogs that either the vendor wouldn't replace or they waited too long for the warranty or whatever happened. So to me, if the agency has the capabilities, by all means, definitely try the puppy route. If you've got experienced staff, you've got the capability to expose a dog, you've got the setup, the vehicles, the so forth to do this, you'll probably find a lot more success than you expect. And the best part is you're actually raising and training the dog in the environment you expect it to go work in versus getting it from Europe, where all it's done is a
Yeah.
sport field, a dog trailer, and a kennel.
Yeah.
You're getting the dog into like our friend there in Colorado, I think is Otto is the dog's name, right? A
Oh,
little
yeah,
older.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
Picken County, yeah.
yeah. So that dog has lived in the police car, has been driving around, going to schools, doing all of these things. That's his job, and he's been doing that since a puppy. So the environment was solved. The dealing with people, the all those places, riding in the patrol car. This is second nature to the dog. He's not getting this dog at a year old who's never ridden in a car this way, never been around this
Yeah.
many people before. So again, an agency just kind of needs to look at it and say, do we have the capabilities to do this? Do we have the resources to make it happen? And you have to take some courage and say, you know what, let's give it a try. What's the worst we're
Yeah.
gonna do? Lose some time, which we're getting paid to do this job regardless. And the worst case scenario is we lost some vet bills and a few grand on a puppy. I in a lot of cases for a lot of agencies, I would go that route
Yeah.
because they'll find out that the fear mongering that happens, like, oh, you never know what you get with puppies. It's a crapshoot. There's truth to that, but if you do your homework and you go to breeders who have proven genetics, I mean, our European counterparts are doing this all the time. Like the cops
Yeah.
in Europe, many of the programs now raise puppies within the program and they hold the breeders accountable in the sense of like, don't offer me garbage, offer me good
Yeah.
genetics. And if I wash out 3 puppies from you, I'm never buying from you again. And the unique thing that happened from that philosophy was breeders were like, I don't have anything for you. Sorry, don't come right now. So they'll actually turn business away because they don't want to lose
Yeah.
the bigger picture, which is what law enforcement wants. Good. I want a good relationship. Call me when you have something you know I like and it'll meet our standards versus I want to sell you, want to sell you, want to sell you, and just hope you pick the
Right.
right one. So it's it's very doable. I do think it does need to have the right size agency with the right support features in place,
Yeah.
the right resources in place, and the experience in place to make it successful.
I think something cool we're kinda seeing too a little bit is we've been starting to really work a lot more with other agencies, which has tons of benefits
Yes.
because, like you talked about earlier, training aids, right?
Yes.
Oh, my training kit, your dog looks like a rock star. You go put him on, something that the ATF brings in, and my dog looks at me like kind of puzzled, like, what
What
is
is
this?
this? I don't know what
That's
that
kind
is.
of, I feel like this is somewhat similar, but, and then you might get a behavioral change, but they're just confused, right? So we've noticed a huge level of success and starting to generalize different people's odor kits and things that we can't even get our hands on. We've
Yep.
been working a little bit with the ATF lately, and it's like they've got stuff that I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to be able to get that.
Yep.
And so that's been super important. And I think just also being able to help each other. So like you said, Drew is picking counties a little while from where we work, and he can come down to the sheriff's office and train if he wants to, and we can help him out. He's a one dog department. So they went really out on a limb, letting him, raise the dog and train the dog. But fortunately, he was able to use the Ford
'Cause
Canine
he reached out
platform,
well, he
and
also reached
yeah,
out to you guys, and he cro you cops have to cross-pollinate, get off your own island, get out there, just like you said, and it's tough, there's politics and bullshit and everything that kind of exists within that world,
yeah,
but you have to cross-pollinate, you have to do what you just said, and I'll bring up your area. Your area has gotten better about it, but there's still regions where everybody kind of pulls apart. Your agency gets named half the time anyway. Like, oh, Arapaho, they kind of do their own thing. We do
I
it.
know, yep,
And that was, as I got to dig into it, that was more to do with the group before you guys.
yes,
And nothing against that. It was different day, different time. So there's not judgment there. But where we're at now, the more that we cross pollinate, we share locations, materials, knowledge, skill set, as the old saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we all go with it, I don't care what the badge, what the patch is, we all have the same job:
yeah,
protect the public. So we can't lose sight of that mission. And then within that, let's work together, because at certain points in time when the shit hits the fan, we're bound to be forced to work together.
yeah,
Just do one officer involved shooting and see how many agencies show up. So you better
yeah,
have, or a mass shooting at wherever. So
yeah,
we have to do it. We can't operate on old ideas, beliefs, grudges, whatever there may be, and get out there and say, "Hey, look, I got new my ego's checked. I just want to go
yep,
work my dog, have a good experience. Show me what you do." I may love it. I may say, "Great, not for what we do, but I see why you guys do it. Cool." And I think once we get ourselves over that mental hump of the ego and like trying to prove something, we will get far more better results by being inclusive and working together. And what little tips and the tricks can I get from you to make me better, and vice versa?
yeah.
I'm happy to share some of the stuff I've done, or highlight my fuck ups so that way I can maybe save you from going through that too.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky now, and I think that that has really been shifting because you have a whole bunch of us, like, younger handlers that were kind of
Mhm.
handed this that no, you stay here and we train
Yep.
together and you don't train,
This is the
you know,
boundary line. Do not cross it. Yeah.
right. And now it's like, with the sheriff we have now, he's supportive of us, bringing people in and going to other agencies, and that's been huge,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
even just joining different networks to bring in instructors or traveling. I mean, it's been massively effective in improving our dogs because we already were a little bit unique raising puppies for you know detection work and also working in the schools and doing things like that. And so now when you can bring that together and you can start, like you said, learning from other people, using different people's kits, and hey, maybe I have something to bring too, it's it's definitely helpful. It's been
Everybody
really
wins.
cool in the yeah, you're right. And so hopefully, as listeners kind of see some of the things we've touched on when it comes to puppies and developing them, and especially like you just touched on, there's a lot of things out there that I think that fear mongering that goes in, like, hey, it's you have a really small percentage of getting a good dog. Well, you can stack the odds in your favor for sure. Vetting your breeder, and sometimes these breeders, if you go to a good breeder, they've been breeding for 40 years, and they're competing with their own hunting dogs, and they travel around and mix up their breed, and so it was kind of fascinating when we got this last dog because the kennel that we got him from, the breeder was like, "Well, if I were to pick a dog on my own, here's what I would do." And she'd been breeding dogs for I think longer than I've been alive, but that's experience right there. And so she was flexible enough to let us come take the puppies out of the out of the litter, put them in a place they've never been, then see what the dogs do. If they're away from mom, they're away from the litter, you just have a few of them out here in the field. Do they go explore? Do they show confidence, or are they just whining right away? And that's, Michael Ellis has talked on that a little bit. It doesn't mean he might have a litter of his Malinois. Like, just because that one's shy right now doesn't mean that he
Mhm.
won't be different later.
Mhm.
But, for me, looking at a detection dog, if I'm going to start soon, I might as well stack the odds with as much confidence that I can have right now and then develop from there. So it's cool to see that openness from some of these breeders.
I'll give you my personal stats. Over the past, let's just call it 6 years, maybe a little bit more, I've done 16 puppies. Out of the 16 puppies, one did not turn out the way that we wanted it to be. He was just not strong enough, or he was it's actually Natalie's mom's personal dog now because environmentally, one day he'd be great, another day it wouldn't. So he wasn't consistent in his environmental soundness. So he was washed out. I've had two other ones that stayed in detection, just not what I picked them for. So, example, I picked a dog named Chip. I was raising him to be, I was going to do electronics media with him years ago. He was like his brother, the one that washed out, but he was more stable. But he was great outdoors. Like outdoors, nothing phased him. Indoors, it was 70% of the time he was good, but there was that 30% time that he would be weirded out about something. He ended up getting a job as a human remains detection dog. So he still met a goal, just wasn't what I initially picked him out for. And then there was another one very similar in nature. It was a all black spaniel. We wanted to do, and he ended up doing conservation work instead of this. Again, very confident outside, just not as good inside. So out of 16 puppies, there's actually a couple more, but I'm kind of cutting, just keeping it in straight detection. We've had obviously a much higher success rate.
Yeah.
Three that didn't make it, or three, or sorry, one that didn't make it, two that just got reassigned to something else. So if I was looking at it from an agency standpoint, let's just say I want them to be bomb or drug dogs or whatever, then I had three that didn't make it for those jobs. I would have had to give away, wash, whatever, but I had 13 that did. So those are
Yeah.
good numbers.
Yeah.
And again, it's what I stacked the deck because I went to breeders who had proven lineage and the parents were working dogs. And this is the important part when it comes to puppy selection for detection. If I'm picking the sporting breeds, spaniels, labradors, pointers, etc., that the parents have proven good genes for hunting, because that's the linchpin that really makes it important for me, for a detection dog, because it's going to have genetic search skills kind of in there,
Yep.
desire, I should say. The environmental will be on me. That's the raising part of it. So they'll be bold to a certain level, but not, this is where, again, like you just said, your selection, putting them outside, see which ones are naturally bold, gives you stacks to deck in your favor. Like you said, it could change. I mean, we have seen puppies that seemed strong that weren't as strong as we thought, and we saw puppies that were, eh, nothing to get you all excited about. That all of a sudden I saw them later on, and we're like, damn, that one came
Yeah.
around. So that's the part that scares the shit out of a lot of the trainers is like,
Yeah.
it, but I throw the same numbers back at them. I'm like, okay, so out of all the dogs, especially the veteran trainers, out of all these dogs that you've selected in all your years, what's your ratio? How
Yeah.
many? And it's going to land fairly close to the same as we did with puppies. But
Yeah.
there's that fear, that stigma that comes with puppies that doesn't exist with the old dogs. If we really looked at the numbers and how many adult dogs that agencies wash out or replace,
Yeah.
you could easily make the argument that picking adults was highly flawed if you looked at the real numbers. But the reason why
Yeah.
it works is because when the agency goes to a vendor and says it doesn't work out, give me another dog, they'll eventually get the dog that they're looking for at some point in time. So
Yeah.
therefore, at the end, it still works. Well, the same thing happens with the puppy world, but the time consideration is what gets them nervous. Like, well, what if I get to 8 months? I just wasted 8 months, and I'm like, you guys are doing the same thing anyway. Like, you're
Yeah.
still doing the job. I get it. It's when they look at it from a school standpoint, we have X amount of weeks. Again, I'm gonna raise the puppy ahead of time before we even get to that point, and most times, where it gets a little bit, "Hey, this is detection dog only." Dual
Yeah.
purpose changes the game a bit.
Yes.
That's where I would
Yeah.
say, "Okay, I'm gonna lean towards the adult dogs. I need to see more. I need to see more metal in the dog if it's gonna have to fight somebody for real, stuff you're
Right.
not gonna see as a puppy." But if I'm talking detection dogs, I mean, just look at all the bloodhounds that are puppies, all the bloodhound tracking dogs that are out there that so many agencies
Yeah.
start off with a puppy and it's just second nature to them. They don't even question it. It's like, if you go to most of the bloodhound tracking units, they would never take an adult dog. They only
Yeah.
take puppies because to them, what's wrong with this adult? Why is somebody going to give me this adult? There's something wrong
So
with it. Where the puppy side of it is no, we've catered it, we raise it, we develop it. It's the one we want. So it works in one world under one lens. I
yeah.
think The tracking lens with bloodhounds is a model that's similar in nature to detection dogs that can show it could work. And then I would say that's probably in the law enforcement world as far as you could probably go with puppy raising. Not that you can't do it on the dual purpose side, but there is more potential risk for success if you go that route.
Yeah, I mean, that adds a whole other element to it, like you said, because you might not even see some of that confidence that really needs to be tested until the
Yep.
dog is 18 months or 16 months, whereas with a detection dog, I might be able to tell a lot sooner, right? I can start seeing, hey, I bring the dog out, I put the dog inside. It doesn't want to do anything except for lay on the floor and
Mhm,
get pet,
mhm.
and so you can start kind of assessing that. But there's a lot of agencies that have, detection only dogs, or I'm starting to, I think, see a little bit more and more where they're not necessarily always going dual purpose. They say, hey, we're going to have a single purpose apprehension dog and a single purpose detection dog. And I think for the
Absolutely.
handlers, that makes it a lot easier on them,
Oh,
right? Because you
it
just
makes
get
your
to
training
focus on
objective
your,
clear.
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. And I think too, like with the puppies that we've been implementing with the handlers too, the bond is there way different than, "Hey, Cameron, here's your 16-month-old dog, say hi and now go train it on explosives in the
Yeah,
next 16 weeks,"
yeah.
and you're like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, it's a lot different when it's like, "Here's an 8-week-old puppy. You're responsible
Mhm,
for this," and
mhm.
it's been pretty, like, I think, really positive to see, and especially when you bring in the detection world, sometimes you're like, "Oh, my dog looks kinda weird, like, searching kinda weird." You're like, "I think he's gotta go to the bathroom." Take
Mhm,
him out,
mhm.
sure enough, right? Because I've
Yep.
been around him long enough to know, this isn't you
Uh-huh.
normally.
Yep.
Where sometimes if you're thrown an older dog, you may not know all that just because you haven't had literally as much time around the dog.
Yep.
But, yeah, it's fascinating to see things kinda starting to shift, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. No, it is super cool to see it.
Yeah, and we just are now taking on a single purpose apprehension dog at the sheriff's office, which is
Nice.
actually kind of cool. And he'll be working with our SRT. It's basically
Nice.
SWAT that's on full time. And again, I think like looking at some agencies and what they're doing and kind of seeing that they can say, hey, if we can have a dog attached to a unit, right? Like for us that work in the schools, having dogs that are attached there that already have detection capabilities.
Got it.
Now, if there's a school bomb threat, it's not like we have to wait for, other
Mhm.
places to send dogs. We
Yep.
can kind of solve that a lot sooner, has been really effective. And I'm starting to see that trickle to the agencies around us too.
Yep. Absolutely. The way it has to be looked at, and I had the conversation with my friend who's the chief of police in Orlando, because he was a former drug dog handler, then became a dual purpose dog handler, then a sergeant of the K-9 unit, and throughout his career, now he's all the way as chief of Orlando, has always kept dogs have been an important thing in his career. And like he said, the dog is an asset to the agency. And there's a unit I have that has specialists for this asset. So they're in charge of it. I can now put this asset on loan to specialized units so they can use
Yeah.
it, but the training and the standards must still follow what the specialized unit, the canine unit,
Yeah.
says needs to be done. Just so they don't, what they've learned was when they gave the asset only to a specialized unit, like say, here's your dog, that unit has no dog experience, right?
Yeah.
So then the struggle starts happening and they don't know how to fix it. So then they always come back over to here. Then the canine unit's like, we never see you. Like, how are we supposed to solve this? So him having understanding from being a handler in both single purpose and dual purpose was like, look, the way this is going to work is canine belongs to the canine unit. So this
Yeah.
asset is managed by canine. I will put the asset on loan to the specialized units to use it appropriately because like it should be and be ready and be
Yeah.
available. But everything that regards to that specialty falls back to that training, that specialized unit to maintain its training, to maintain its integrity, to keep it up.
Yeah.
And then that way there's a better continuity of all these things and not all these like mini islands with even within one department, depending on how large an agency is.
Yeah, and I think that's where that development, like specifically with our agency, came in, where it's like, hey, we need to send people from each of these units to go get trained so that
Yes.
they can be on the same page in terms of meeting the same standards,
Mhm.
achieving the same things, and like you said, not having 20 mix match or mismatch standards. It's important, especially for court purposes, like the narcotics dog that's now training with us, you need to meet the same standards we meet, the same standards canine meets, right? Because it's
Because
all
we
the
know if they
same.
go to court, it affects all of us.
Yep.
That narc unit doesn't have
Absolutely.
to worry about it. They're like, "Oh, shit, we lost that case." But the rest of us pay the man for the
Yeah.
rest of thanks to either local case law that gets created because of that dog team, or even worse, nationwide case law, Supreme Court case law that gets developed because of
Yeah.
what comes at the end of the day, lack of good management and supervision that possibly, in many cases, prevents some of these issues that come up. Again, it's just every agency has unique things. You just need to have a clear structure of how it works. Okay, I'll give a dog to a specialized unit, but are we giving them the tools to be successful? Meaning the training, the education, the resources. We're not cutting corners. We're doing what we got to do to make this work the right way. And are the people in charge of it understanding, the supervisors understanding what the requirement is if they get this asset? Do they
Yeah.
get that this has to happen? Because there's also that glass ceiling that exists, right? The dog goes to that unit. Let's just say it's a narc unit. Well, narc units want stats. So they're working cases, writing warrants, doing all this stuff. Meanwhile, the dog sits. The dog sits. It doesn't get used. And then all of a sudden, oh, we need the dog. And the whole reason why they got the dog was almost like you said, well, we want the dog, so I don't have to call the other unit to send me the dog over, which takes 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or they told me they're busy. I want my own now. But then if you don't do what
Yep.
you're supposed to maintain that asset, you've done a more of a disservice than a service. You made a convenience, but at a disservice to the bigger picture.
Yeah, it definitely has to be set up right. That is for sure, because otherwise it could be not good, and especially just when you have too many people that aren't communicating well too. I think that's where a big part of this comes into, and
But yeah,
and the good thing is, if your agency does a good job setting standards, setting policy that governs all your different units, making sure that your training is consistent. What platform are you using? Are you actually logging enough training hours? Or are you going and putting a whole bunch of fluff in there that you didn't really do?
but yeah,
And this goes back to the old, hey, you can say your dog's good, right? But we're going to see your dog search, right? And so at the end of the day, you should just let your dog do the talking, right?
yep.
And spend time training. There's no way around it. You have to put in the time to make sure that your dog's consistent, because there is nothing more nerve wracking than if you haven't put in that time and a whole bunch of people are standing there relying on you, you know? So
Mhm.
we see this a lot, I think, too, because unfortunately, our state, Colorado's kind of a hot spot for shootings, which
But yeah.
is unfortunate. And we just had one here recently in Jefferson County, and there were dogs there from all over the state,
Mhm.
that were there sniffing cars and making sure that everything was good after the fact, and so you definitely want to make sure that you're showing up with your best foot forward. And so I hope that people, reach out, or if you haven't gone on, hopefully listeners can go on Ford Canine. The learning platform on there is awesome. And I know that, constantly it's updated. Social media is always updated. So I encourage people, if you're not a member, definitely check out the membership. It is worthwhile. We've learned a ton. If you can really do it, get Cameron to come out. That is where it's worth it. Have him come out. So we've learned a ton of valuable information, and now I pass a lot of that information on through my dog training, and I'm applying it to hopefully help other agencies that maybe they can't have you out, but if we're an hour away and they can have us train, it's massively beneficial.
It's
So
always important to share the knowledge, share the information. I'm always I love that people do that. It doesn't I'm not a guardian of this information. I'm a spreader and sharer of the information. So I'm glad that you guys do that.
yeah, well, we appreciate you taking your time in your insanely busy schedule to sit down and talk puppies and training with us, and just thank you for being here.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I'm glad to do it, and I hope the viewers and listeners have some good takeaways from this episode.